Hey guys, I'm back. It's been a few years since I've posted anything on YouTube, so um, I've largely just been aloof for the past couple of years. Um, I don't know after Hillary Clinton after Hillary Clinton lost the election after everything that happened in the Democratic primaries with with David Brock essentially pulling his bullshit and and everything that happened in California and Nevada and New York and Kentucky and Rhode Island with all the voter the polling places being moved around and shit. I mean, just and then after all that shit that happened with them arguing about Hillary Clinton being the more electable candidate, essentially the DNC making the same damn mistake they made in 2004 when they pushed John Kerry over Howard Dean. You know, just I, I largely just threw my hands up in the air and said fuck it. You know, that and I moved into a new apartment. Um, Past few months I've been past couple of months I've been on leave because of surgery. You know, they came in, they went in and sawed my forearm bone in half and took a lot of scar tissue out of my wrist and shit. They scoped it and all. So I've been stuck at home and largely bored out of my ass. And money's been getting tighter lately because of my short-term disability checks not really paying as much as I need to help me deal with my bills and buy food at the same time. So I've had to basically wipe out a good portion of my savings up to this point. So, yeah, there's a lot of shit that's gone on the back burner in the past few years. Things I used to enjoy, and mm, and keeping this channel up was one of them. So you'll notice that I changed my name from Active Asshole on Roids to Socialism on Roids because I mean I got a few criticisms from some friends over time about how the about how the asshole moniker was essentially putting people off. So I said, you know what, fine, it is a bit childish. I'm just gonna change it over to something else and get an avatar and shit. I mean, my channel still looks like crap, but my even when I was more serious about my YouTube channel, it was more of an afterthought. You know, the aesthetics of it were more of an afterthought than anything else. But yeah, the last few years have been a real roller coaster, and just it's like every day there's something going on with Donald Trump and his administration doing something absolutely abhorrent. Just to the point where even if I had gotten involved in left wing YouTube circles again, bread tubing as we call it today, I wouldn't know where to keep up. I wouldn't know where to start. So it just I don't know. It just seemed like after 2016, I I just threw my hands in the air and I said fuck it, uh, and I whatever whatever political activism I've done has largely been relegated to Facebook. But yeah, I've probably lost about 70% of the people, 70% of the friends that I used to have when I first started on Facebook, when I really got into Facebook back in 2010, just because of the 2016 primaries and because of this election's primaries. Because again, you got the same old fucks basically getting pissed off at younger people because we won't come around to seeing it their way. Just because they bought into the whole Clintonista triangulation thing, somehow the rest of us are supposed to buy into it so that they won't feel stupid for everything that the centrist wing of the Democratic Party, everything that these Joe Biden supporters and former Hillary supporters, everything they've been pushing up till now has basically just been their attempt at trying to save face because they were too chicken shit or too bought off to actually pursue meaningful reform on any fundamental level. So, yeah, I bet you I've given about $450 to Bernie Sanders' campaign since the start of this election, which is like I gave about $200 in 2016 to his campaign, just little payments here and there, but I've spent just twice as much since the start of this campaign because, again, I'm a member of the Democratic Socialists of America, and they endorsed him, and I'm grateful to Bernie Sanders for making it where the term socialist is no longer something that carries a negative connotation with the vast majority of people under a certain age. I mean, if you're over the age of 50, there's a good chance that you have a negative opinion of socialism. But if you're under the age of 50, it's like, hey, it's very popular with us. The majority of American women have a positive opinion of socialism. I mean, Bernie Sanders, by his efforts and through the efforts of people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Lee Carter, Presley, they've moved the paradigm far enough to the left, the discussion far enough to the left that now we don't have to. We tell people that we're socialists, and they're just like, whatever. It's not something that raises eyebrows anymore, and I live in Alabama. It's like I live in the single reddest state in America. Yeah, let me just back up a bit. and you'd be amazed at how much people have softened to the idea of democratic socialism, or to socialism in general. I mean, the only real opposition we get anymore are from centrist Democrats who are just terrified they're going to lose their fucking gig. They're terrified they're going to lose their gravy train. And this sort of gets back to a point I brought up with a good friend of mine, wherein I said, these same people who complain, these same older centrists who complain about socialists, about younger socialist activists, about younger progressives, are the same people who were complaining about the Tea Party when they were digging their heels in and essentially telling the rest of us that eventually we'll see it their way if they wait long enough. It's the same goddamn mentality. But somehow we're the Tea Party of the left. I tell you, these people, they live on a whole nother world. Yeah, you can tell I'm making this video on the fly. It's like no preparation, no production notes, no nothing. Just me spouting stuff to my cell phone. So yeah, it's like back in 2016. I had my fair share of battles on social media with Clinton supporters, but now in 2000 and in the 2020 presidential election cycle, it's like many of these same former Clinton supporters worm their way into admin and moderator positions ahead of time, so that they could ban and censor Bernie Sanders supporters. I mean, they're so goddamn threatened. I've personally been kicked out of like 19 groups on Facebook, and not little groups either. We're talking large groups like True Blue Party, which has like 8,500 members, Liberal America, which has over 20,000 members. Just all these people who spent years and years complaining about how the Democratic Party was unresponsive and how they were waiting for a true progressive to come along, and then one comes along and they want to crucify and and ostracize people who promote that true progressive candidate. It's absolutely adorable watching these people show their true colors. You know, it's just uh, this is why when I'm confronted with former Hillary voters, and current Joe Biden voters, and Kamala Harris voters and shit, and people who essentially support Elizabeth Warren for not because of her policies but because she's a woman, you know, basically passing on a vagina anointment to her. I pointedly ask these people, guys, what's it like to be a conservative? I tell you, man, this shit. Oh shit, I piss people off so fucking much when I do that, because it's like they have no answer. They have no answer for why they're essentially going back on everything they said for years. The same people who put Joe Biden up on a pedestal now are the same people who were complaining about the son of a bitch before being Obama's vice president, rehabilitated his image. They were the same people who had the same criticisms about him as the rest of us. If Evan Bayh had been the one chosen by Barack Obama to be his vice president, they they'd be saying the same shit about Evan Bayh right now as they are Joe Biden. It's just a big old get out of voting for Bernie Sanders free card in the general election to them. That's all it is. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Every one of these people that they keep gravitating toward has more to do with the fact that they're basically being sheep herded by the DNC and by people who are part of the establishment, and folks at MSNBC who are owned by Comcast. And you can't tell me that Comcast, that they're not putting all this support behind Joe Biden because of Bernie Sanders going on strike with Comcast workers. You can't tell me that's and you can't tell me that the Washington Post isn't going after Bernie Sanders because he pushed for Jeff Bezos and Amazon to start paying their workers $15 an hour, even though these same Biden supporters will claim with a straight face that had nothing to do with it. It's like they want to. That's the thing I've noticed about many of these older centrist, former Hillary supporter, current Joe Biden and Pete Buttigieg supporting types. It's just. Many of them will claim they love the squad. Oh, we love AOC. We love Ilhan Omar. Oh, but they don't want to give Bernie Sanders or our revolution any credit for laying the groundwork so that these fine young activists could defeat incumbent Democrats to begin with. It's absolutely adorable watching these people just wring their hands, split hairs, rationalize any way they can, so that they don't have to give Bernie Sanders and the movement that he started, that he helped coalesce around his 2016 campaign, any credit for the rise of a new progressive wave within Democratic politics. They need to somehow find a way to separate AOC and the squad in their minds from Bernie Sanders, so that they can simultaneously love them for being young women of color, but at the same time find a way to continue hating Bernie Sanders, even though he helped recruit AOC and the rest of the squad, his organization. He's been working with them. Hell, I'm surprised these people don't hate Elizabeth Warren, because Bernie Sanders tried to encourage her to run for president back in 2016, so he wouldn't have to. I mean, it's just, and many of them were basically saying crummy things about Elizabeth Warren until Joe Biden started slipping in the polls, and now many of these same people in MSNBC, they won't say anything about it because they're probably keeping their options open in the event that Joe Biden crashes and burns or has a stroke or something. They need to find some way to even though Wall Street doesn't like Elizabeth Warren any more than they like Bernie Sanders. They'd rather settle with her than settle with Bernie Sanders, because they'd rather have somebody who doesn't really have a long-term plan, who's a threat, as opposed to someone who does. That's like the fundamental difference between Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. I just think it's amazing that so many of these that these former Clinton supporters, they bitch and moan and groan, and they say, "Oh, I wish Bernie Sanders would go away. Why can't he run as an independent instead of running like a Democrat, only to turn around and be an independent again?" All these people having their little old baby boomer spazzes, just they're just spazzing out. My God. No wonder Donald Trump got 2/3 of the white baby boomer vote. Fucking tards, man. Yeah, I said it. Yeah, I know there are plenty of older progressives, and God bless you all, but goddamn, man, your peers are downright insufferable by this point. No, just and don't even get me started on all the older black men and women who love Joe Biden. I mean, it's like all the you look at all these white baby boomers that support Joe Biden, and they'll try to put Joe Biden's support from older black men and women up on a fucking pedestal, even though the only reason they even like him to begin with now is because of the Obama rehabilitation, being Obama's VP for 8 years. That's it. That's it. All the while ignoring the fact that people of color under the age of 50 don't like Joe Biden. They fucking hate his ass. It's like, or at the very least, they're indifferent to him. Here in the South, it's like, where are all these Joe Biden supporters supposed to be? I mean, I live in Alabama, the state with the second largest percentage of African American voters of any state in the union after Mississippi, and yet I haven't met one person who openly claims that they support Joe Biden. I've met a few Cory Booker supporters. I've met Bernie Sanders supporters. I've met Kamala Harris supporters. But I haven't met one goddamn person who claims in real life to like Joe Biden. He's that uninspiring that nobody wants to defend him, even if they do support him. It's absolutely fucking nuts. It's bonkers that anyone can believe that this son of a bitch should be in the race. I mean, it's like if he weren't Obama's former VP, he would have already gone down in flames. He would have had John Delaney poll numbers. He would have been like Hickenlooper. All right, he would have crashed and burned. But for whatever reason, it's just these former Clinton supporters, they love to pretend like the whole under 50 the resentment that people under the age of 50 have for Joe Biden centrist candidates, that they don't exist, that somehow, oh, if we just wait long enough, eventually you'll all grow out of it, as if we're all a bunch of fucking 5-year-olds and it's still the early 90s. Yeah, I get it. They most of these people are stuck in the 1990s, because that's part of the reason why they're still hung up on the Clintons, because that was like they're still stuck in that particular era. You listen to Joe Biden, he's stuck in that particular era. Their character development ended with the 1990s. That's why they will never move past the social constructs from that era. They're still looking at us. Hell, I'm like a 34-year-old man. I got gray in my hair now. I got gray in my hair and getting more every year. And I still have baby boomers basically talking like I'm still in fucking kindergarten, man. It's just these old, out of touch, stupid motherfuckers who largely gave us Donald Trump, by the way. But they'll still blame us for it. They'll still sit there with a straight face and claim that somehow us staying home on election day in 2016 gave us Donald Trump, even though only 12% of Bernie Sanders supporters voted for Donald Trump in the general election, compared to, say, 25% of Hillary's supporters, who voted for John McCain. Well, okay, did I say? Wait a minute. See, this is the problem with taking pills, with taking antidepressants and so much. It's like all the stuff I've had to take over the years is finally catching up with me, and it's like I lose my train of thought so easily. But going back to what I was saying, It's like they'll sit there and bitch and moan about the 12% of Bernie Sanders supporters who voted for Donald Trump and claim that they somehow gave the election to Donald Trump in 2016. But 25% of Clinton supporters, while ignoring the fact that 25% of Clinton supporters voted for John McCain in 2008, and a lot of that was because Hillary Clinton ran a Southern strategy-esque campaign in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Kentucky that caused a lot of people, a lot of old white men, to essentially move on and vote for the other old white guy, the old white guy in the race. I mean, hell, I remember what happened in 2008. I was following that shit on dailycoast.com and the liberal blogosphere. I remember how Hillary Clinton was basically using Bush campaign style Rovian tactics in those states, but somehow that didn't, it just I mean, hell, that's part of the reason why Barack Obama even chose Joe Biden to begin with, was because one, Joe Biden was a co-founder of the centrist New Democrats coalition, Hillary's coalition, and two, he had to find some way to get the old white dudes to come back and love him a bit, which didn't really work. So, I mean, it was all political. It was just political calculation on Barack Obama's part. And then the son of a bitch years later says, "Well, you see, we have a problem with purity tests in our among our younger progressive voters." And I'm just like, "Bitch, we're the ones who voted you over the top so that you could beat Hillary in '08. We're the reason you were even the first black president to begin with." God, it's like this motherfucker, Barack Obama. Man, you might be the first president I ever personally, whose policies I personally benefited from, because again, his stimulus spending got me out of a very bad situation that could have ended in a way that I just don't want to think about. But damn, I spent like 2 years after Barack Obama was elected making excuses for the son of a bitch. Even though he basically sat on his hands after Ted Kennedy died. It was like, oh, well, I no longer have 60 senators. Oh, well, I guess we were... And basically hid behind the whole excuse of Mitch McConnell and his obstruction. Just like, you had options, you fucker. I mean, he's the reason we have purity tests now at all, is because we're tired of having people pretend to be progressive in the primaries only to turn around and pull a general election pivot and tack back to the center. It's like, oh, that was real progressive language and everything when you were a primary challenger, but as soon as you got our votes and got the nomination, oh, well, now it's all incremental change and grand bargain bullshit. I hate to sound like I'm stuck in the past after complaining about Hillary's supporters being stuck in the past, but I have to look back on this shit every now and then, and just to remember who I am and why I and so many other millions of millennial voters have come to where we are today. I have to be reminded of why these people cannot be trusted, and why centrists, the only thing we can really trust them to do is talk out of both sides of their mouth. They call it a general election pivot. Back in the old days, we used to call it lying. We used to call it bullshitting. Funny how the Beltway conventional wisdom crowd will try to put a positive spin on lying to their voters. So, yeah, I'm not sure if I'll be making too many more videos. At least not as often as I did back in the old days, but back when my YouTube channel was in its when it was at its zenith, which wasn't very good anyway. It was about the only thing I did was argue against libertarianism. That was my niche. But when half of the libertarian movement essentially jumped on board with Donald Trump and and threw their lot in with the alt right. They basically proved everything their critics their critics have been saying about them for years, that they were just using libertarianism as a hiding place for neo-Confederate and white nationalist bullshit. And when Gamergate happened, and when that was a thing with these people, and when they used that as a bridge to 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 snake over onto white supremacist bullshit, I rose a glass into the air and said, well, I win, because they proved us all right. They proved every single one of us right after they spent years denying that shit. And there's no going back into the closet after coming out of the closet as a bunch of fucking racists. There just isn't. This is and so I've given up on arguing against libertarians, because they've proven by their own actions that it was all a front all along. They've proven it. They've proven us right. Where do we go from here? Now, that's not to say that we shouldn't argue against free market fundamentalism, but libertarians, now that the libertarian crowd is basically part of the MAGA crowd, the MAGA hat crowd, and they've come out as a bunch of Stefan Molyneux loving, Chris Cantwell dick sucking pieces of, well, not just Richard Spencer idolizing pieces of human shit. There's there. Where do you go from there? Where do you really go from there? I mean, what was I supposed to do? I mean, it's like, what do I go back to criticizing a religious right? They're dying anyway. The Christian Coalition collapsed back in '07. They've been going downhill ever since, and their older members are dying off quickly, just like Hillary Clinton's supporters. Yeah, I went there. Old age attrition is going to make it where the Democratic Party, it will make it where the Democratic Party's centrist wing collapses in due time as well, because again, younger people within the Democratic Party's base are pretty goddamn far to the left compared to many of the old guard who are stuck in the Clinton era. I'm fond of saying to these people, you can either vote for Bernie Sanders today, or if you're alive later on, you can vote for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez 10 years from now. Might as well just get it out of the way. They don't like me too much after that. Understandably. They like to say, oh, well, you're a sexist. Or no, not sexist. You're ageist. To which I reply, how is me pointing out the fact that 2/3 of white baby boomer men voted for Donald Trump ageist? Huh? How is that ageist? Well, fuck you. That's usually how that conversation ends, because they don't want to take responsibility for anything. They don't want to take responsibility for essentially putting us through hell. I'm sorry, but I burped. I'm sorry, but the American dream may have been the American dream for your generation, but it's never been the American dream for ours. Outsourcing, downsizing, and automation have ensured that we will never have the same kind of prosperity in our lifetimes that the baby boomers had growing up. We didn't have the American dream where we could have a low skill manufacturing job that would pay for 2 cars, a house, and a family of 4. We didn't have that. What we had was living out of our mother's basement, or living out of a 1-bedroom apartment while having 3 jobs. So I'm going to cut off I'm going to leave y'all here with this one here, because my cell phone has like a 30-minute limit on its videos. So yeah, this, again, socialism on roids. Peace out, guys.